Good evening, Fast Trackers. My name is Robin Deason, and you might recognise me from such emails as your reminder this afternoon. We are also live streaming this event, so a big welcome to everybody who's listening in. It's great to see so many of you here today. So before we begin, just some housekeeping rules. First off, we are not expecting the fire alarm to go off, but if it does, the exits are here, and then just head upstairs, follow the green arrow. Mobile phones, please can I ensure that you put those on silent, please, for the duration of the evening. And finally, tonight is an excellent opportunity to network with your colleagues from across the industry, but please ensure that what you do discuss is not confidential or commercially sensitive. Now, some of you may be aware of what IGD does as a charity, but I'm sure there's a lot of you in the room who first found out about us through the Fast Track programme. So just to bring you up to speed, I got a little video for you. So as you can see, there's a lot that we do at IGD. So back to you guys. So at the Fast Track Learner Journey, we're currently in Module 4. So you've probably learnt about the shopper and our industry and done the content on that. But now it's all about your personal development. Now please don't worry if you haven't got this far yet. You've still got until the end of November to complete it. And then you get a certificate with your name on it. What's better than that? So here is your learner journey for this evening. So first up, we've got Mary Clark from Sticky Change. She's going to be telling you how a growth mindset can help you maximise your potential. We will then bring our industry VIPs up. Now at IGD, we are the lifelong learning partners for the industry. So we have people at different stages of their career. So we've got Felicity Punnett from Premier Foods. Now, she was doing the Fast Track programme a couple of years back, so she knows exactly how you're feeling right now. We then move on to Michael Evans from Greencore. He is their Group Communications Director. And finally, we have Sam Redmond of Pret, who's going to be coming up and telling us her thing. Following that, we will be inviting our panel back onto the stage, along with our chair for the Q&A session. That is Hayley Lees, who is our Head of Charity Engagement and Innovation. And for those who are listening in today, we do have your questions, and we'll make sure they get answered as well. Does that sound good? Yeah. Okay, let's begin. So let's just get a warm welcome, please, for Mary.
Good evening, everybody, here and listening in. I'm absolutely delighted to be with you this evening. It is actually back again, but it's particularly lovely to be setting the scene for what's going to be an excellent session, all about how we maximise our potential. And I think it doesn't matter where you are in your career, wherever it is, whether you're at the start or the middle, or even, forbid, thinking about it, there might be something else outside of this. We can look to maximise our potential. So the session especially I'd like to talk about is, I will share a little bit about Sticky Change. I'm going to keep it very short. As much as anything, it's just to say, why am I up here? What gives me the right to talk to you about these things this evening? What you are going to hear is lots of great stories from the industry and what they have done, what people have done to really promote their potential throughout their careers. As such, therefore, I'm going to keep my stories quite short. And what I want to do is to make this a more interactive session. I want to give the opportunity for you to reflect on your own potential and how it is you're approaching it, and offer you some hints and tips, as indeed there will be many more from the stories of our speakers, about how you can do that thing and maximise it. Now, to do that, I have a little workbook for my session there, and if you would like to turn to the first page, and here, I'm just going to talk you through the agenda in a little bit more detail, but like any good piece of learning, it's always best to have a bit of a goal that you can measure. So once I've talked you through what I'm going to think, I will invite you to write in that box there. Technical hitch, of course, I suddenly realised everybody has to have a pen. So there might have to be some borrowing going on, team pen on the row or something like that. But what I would like to share with you is to get you thinking immediately about where are you headed? What does success look like in your career? Where it is now and where you might want to go. And I'll talk a little bit more about that and why it's important for us as I go on. But then what I really want to go in depth about is about a growth mindset. Now, it may well be that in the room there are some of you who absolutely, you've read the book, Carol Dweck's book, or there might be some of you who've sort of heard of it but doesn't really understand it, or it might be completely new. So again, I will touch on it, folks. I will share with you what the concepts are, and I'll give you an opportunity to reflect on where your mindset is. Building on that, wherever you might be, wherever you consider you are in that growth mindset continuum, what we do know is there are things that we can do, there are techniques that we can adopt which help and encourage and motivate us to adopt a really positive mindset around our career, even when we hit very big challenges. So to that point, I'd like to again invite you to think about, what are your values? Do you know what they are? Have a little think about that. Have a little think about, do you know what your strengths are? And do you play to them? And that is be all in service of putting it all together at the end of our session by thinking, what can you actually do starting tomorrow or even this evening? Think about networking, come back to that you can work on that will maximise your potential in the future. So I will pause for a minute. I've talked a little bit about what the session's going to be about. I'm going to invite you to write down one thing that would make it worthwhile for you from this evening that you would like to take away. So literally pause for 60 seconds while people think of that and write it down or mentally. Bit of pen sharing going on. If you can't think of anything, turn to your partner. Always find that's quite useful. Oh, I'll have that goal. That's good. So moving ahead, folks, who's Sticky Change? Well, Sticky Change is now myself and Fiona. And what gives me the right to stand here? Well, if nothing else, I've probably got an awful lot more experience than quite a few people in this room, distressingly, because we counted up, we've got about 50 to 60 years experience of doing this learning and development thing. What we are passionate about, from the name you can sense it's around change, but especially passionate about people in change. unashamedly focused when we go to organisations to get them talking about how can you give people in your organisation the very best experience. So we do a lot of facilitation, a lot of training, we do a lot of coaching, generally in that space around development. Somebody asked who we work for actually earlier on. Pretty eclectic. If you go on the website, stickychange.com, you will find that we don't actually specialise in any particular sector, but we have worked with the likes of Marks and Spencer's, with Heineken, with EasyJet, with BT, with lots of utility businesses. I've personally worked with the Samaritans and even with a football club. More of that later, or maybe not. What we do ask, and I think this is pertinent to our session, we ask organisations to be very clear about what the journey is, where they are headed, and most especially, what does success look like? Now, that is not always clear to people. In the words of the eminent Stephen Covey, it is good to start with the end in mind. But if I'm honest, on my own personal experience, and indeed talking to many hundreds of coachees actually, quite often their career path has been a series of happy accidents. So I guess what I say to you is, if you're not clear exactly what it is that you want to do, that's not an issue. If you don't even know where you want to end up, that's not an issue. If you are lucky and you have lots of happy accidents, that's brilliant. But at all times, you need to approach these opportunities with a growth mindset. So I, for instance, briefly, I started off doing languages and then went into retail. I went to actually work for Miss Selfridge, which I really enjoyed. But because I was so desperate to get back to Spain, I actually left to be a holiday rep for 6 months, much to the distress of my parents at the time. And I then stayed for 12 years because I was lucky enough to be seen to have some potential. I wasn't really cognizant of it at the time, and I can't say I particularly set out or was particularly ambitious to prove that, but I did end up in the end running what is now First Choice over in Spain. Fantastic job. Another happy accident. During the winter breaks, when traditionally we lose a lot of people in the travel industry, I was seconded back to do recruitment and development of all the new people we'd need for the new season. Loved it. And that actually was then the next opportunity I've given, which was to head up HR and the learning and development for the overseas division. So I think what I'm saying to you is, folks, at all times, be aware of the opportunities. There were many times when I could have thought, no, I don't really want to do that. There were many challenges in the way. But I guess what I have learned and what's really important is that whether you know where you're going or where you don't, and those are the great words of Stephen Covey, what it is really important to do is to have this attitude. Now, again, many of you may well, as I said, know the work of Carol Dweck. She is a professor at Stanford University, and her career has been dedicated to looking at achievement and success. And what she has demonstrated in that research is that there are, when we are faced with challenges particularly, and issues and even tasks, two types of mindsets: the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. I'll say a little bit more about fixed in a moment. But just to plant in your mind that we know that the fixed mindset may be very limiting, whereas what the growth mindset offers to us is an opportunity to believe that no matter what we think the abilities were that we were born with, being offered, we, through hard work, through persistence, through effort, can be even better at what we do and be even more successful in our lives. And I think that is as pertinent to life as it is to the work scenario. So in a little bit more detail, here's what a fixed mindset is around. Again, what I would say, these are not absolutes, folks. You know, it is not that you have one or the other. What you will find, though, throughout your career is that you are presented with challenges that make you think, I can't do this. You can hear it in people's language. Very simple, isn't it? Sometimes you can hear people say when they're watching a TV program or something, well, I can't sing, I never could, or I can't dance. I don't know whether anybody watched the one show a few weeks ago. Jensen Button was on. He was on with a guy who's currently in Strictly. And Kelvin said to Jensen Button, Formula One driver, world champion, really successful, why don't you do Strictly? Jensen's reply was, oh, I've learned only to do the things I'm good at. How interesting. There is somebody who's been really successful, but they have a fixed mindset. They limit the possibility of what they might be able to do and learn. Which I think is a shame, because maybe he could go on and have a completely different career and be even more successful. But I thought that was just a great example. Now, if you think of your own challenges, there will be stuff, won't there, that has you going, oh, I don't like this. Lots of people, lots of us don't particularly like presentations. It's a very easy space to go to, isn't it? I can't do that. But hey, I can see that Helen can do it. So maybe I'm going to try and avoid that. I'm going to get her to do it. Right? Things happen to us, and it feels like it's preordained. But in reality, we can always access, should we choose, a growth mindset. So in the growth mindset space, as I have said, there is the opportunity to take control of your destiny, to say to yourself, I can do this, I will do it, and to put the time and effort in to master it. But let's just pause for a bit, folks. And again, this is where I would really love you to just have a discussion and share something with people beside you. If you would go to that particular column there. Oop, move the right way. I want you to be brutally honest with yourself. It's very easy sometimes to look at the list in the left-hand column there and say, no, that's not me. I know it shouldn't be me. And actually, to even admit that would be like, no, that'd be a failure. So I must be on the right there. The growth mindset. The reality and the truth is, folks, it depends often on the context. So what I would like you to do is, again, share and discuss with the person sat on your right at this point, or if you've got a trio, that's fine. Which do you think you really say? Think of something that maybe you found difficult. What might you be more likely to say? So let's just have a discussion. Thank you, everyone. So I hope you found that a useful discussion, just to think about it. I think sometimes we have to be really critical of ourselves at times. That's part of actually, if you like, having the positive mindset, is be prepared to go and challenge. Listen to your inner dialogue. Okay. If you've kind of been on the space of like, oh, too much of a fixed mindset, I kind of had that around spreadsheets, no matter how hard I try. There is good news. Because even if you consider yourself to maybe be more likely in the past anyway, to have had a mixed mindset, know that the positive news is that you can always cultivate a positive mindset. Sorry, being fixed. And that's because of neuroplasticity. So again, I'm sure lots of you know this, but we own the most incredible machine, and that's our brain. And neuroplasticity is scientifically and irrefutably our ability to rewire and reshape our brain until the day we die. So if you ever get anybody saying they're too old to change, you can tell them scientifically and irrefutably that is not true. If we are motivated to do it and we choose to, we can change. We can rewire our brains. Let me prove it very simply to you. Distressingly again, if you haven't got a pen, this rather loses its impact, but you may be able to share the one. Do me a favour, please would you pick up your pen and anywhere on that sheet, just sign your name as you normally sign your name. Okay, how'd it go at that? Right, swap hands and sign your name again. Some of you will now be trying to perfect the second one. So play to the strengths. Okay. So I'm sure if I asked you folks, some people still trying, I'm sure if I asked you folks, you would say to me that the first signature was very easy. You didn't have to think about it. You've spent a long time perfecting it. You have a supercharged neural pathway. Doesn't even have to focus on it, you just did it. And then I really apologized, but I messed with your brains. Because instead of one nice neuron passing the message to another one, it came to a stuttering stop. And you were like, this is really difficult. Actually, it's really awkward. It's really uncomfortable. And that, really? No, that's not going to get me past any machine. That is a simple example of coming up against your fixed mindset, coming up against your hard wiring. Because if I substitute your first signature to maybe getting up on a stage like this and doing a presentation, your brain, as I think some of our brains, we're honest, have done, have gone, oh, no, really? Can I find something else to do that evening? Do I have to do that? You need to blast through it. Because just like the second signature, were you to practice it again and again and again, you'd come to pretty much, if not perfection, something that would really do. It's the same for a growth mindset. Practice it, put the effort in, change the hard wiring in your brain. So what are some other things that can help you to do that? Personally, I'm a really firm believer that there are two great things in life, which personally, if I thought more about them when I was very much younger, maybe would have made my career even more successful, or certainly even more satisfying and fulfilling. But because actually I wasn't lucky enough to come up against somebody at the time who kind of asked these questions that I'm going to ask you to think about, I had to struggle to find them out. And I can even remember the point at which somebody asked me to assess, what actually is your purpose, Mary? What are you there? What is important to you to deliver? And since that moment, thankfully some years ago, everything I try and do is always with that purpose in mind. So those are your values, folks. That is how you want to live your life. What do you want to do that is in service of you and others, your career, your family, or whatever? Know what they are, because what we know is that people find it much easier to be successful in what they do if their values are aligned. When they're not, we can really struggle. That's when the fixed mindset can kick in. Similarly, know your strengths. Spend time understanding what are the things that really energize you. So what is different about strengths is that, double negative coming up here, they are the things that you get up in the morning and that you do that you cannot not do. And the reason is you're rather addicted to those because at the end of it, you feel energized. Now, I think that can sometimes challenge us because we do have to learn things that don't necessarily energize us, but we have to do them. With a growth mindset, we will put in that effort and hard work and persistence in service at the other end of being sufficiently good at them, even if they never energize you. So once again, folks, I'm going to invite you, first of all, to self-reflect. You can choose, I would suggest, either values or the strengths piece, purely because of time. I'm going to give you, first of all, 5 minutes to look at, if you choose the values, it's on that page there. All right, you can see. If anybody recognises these are taken from Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. If you haven't read any of her stuff, I highly recommend it. If you are going to do the values exercise, your goal is to come up with the 2 most important ones. Hint and tip, the very simple thing to do is go through it pretty spontaneously and ring about 10. Once you've got to 10, it's much easier to get to 2. All right. So you can choose your values if you want. If you've done that and you're all interested in looking at your strengths, then if you go to the last 2 pages, and this, by the way, is from Strengths Profile. You can see there it's the work of Alex Linley at the University of Leicester. If you go online, you can do your own profile if you'd like to actually do the test. But these are the lists, these are the values. Again, it's a rather large list. So again, for time, folks, if you even just wanted to look at the first page, same kind of exercise. Here I'm going to give you the task of coming up with 3 things that you look at and you go, yep, I look at that, it resonates with me. I feel energized when I think about that. So I will first of all, folks, give you 5 minutes for that individual reflection. And then I'm going to get you to do an exercise with another partner. Just a couple more minutes, folks. If you have got your either 2 values or your 3 strengths, you can write them in on your little work page. You'll see there's space for them. Okay, so here is what I'm going to invite you to do now. I would like you to turn to the person on the other side this time, on the left-hand side. We'll change it up a bit. Change it up a bit. Talk to somebody else. Whether you are considering the values or the strengths, you're going to do a bit of co-coaching. So if I'm working with somebody who's got their 2 values identified, I'm going to ask them, how do your 2 values currently impact your day? How do you want them to impact your day? What do you want to do in the future that serves your purpose, your values? And again, if you are from the strengths perspective, then your partner would ask the 2 strengths questions of you. So bit of coaching, bit of listening. Okay, folks. Much as I hate to interrupt the conversation, I'd like to share one more one other lens of looking at this, and then we'll pull it all together and I'll give you a last opportunity to do a bit of sharing and also to decide on an action. So if we put this all together, again, you might have seen these things before. This is the framework of the circles of comfort, learning, and panic zone. To maximize our potential, we could overplay our strengths, because our strengths clearly will lie within our comfort zones. But my contention then, folks, is that you may never do anything more than what you are doing. So what we need to do to maximize our potential is push ourselves out of the comfort zone, maybe even access some strengths that you didn't know before. Work with your values. Identify what would be the actions that you need to develop to be even better, to achieve even more than you are, that lie within the learning zone that stretch you. But it's really important, folks, that they stretch you, not break you. Because at the point of breaking, if you like, here, our fixed mindset can stop us going into the learning zone. What can throw us right back into our comfort zone is if we stretch ourselves to the point of panicking. So a very simple example might be presenting to your team might be something you're reasonably comfortable with, but then you get invited to present to the department. So that brings with it self-limiting beliefs. If one of your things is, I don't do presentations, okay? So therefore, that is where, think about your strengths, play to them, build on them, see how your purpose aligns to delivering it. Find things to practice that, yes, they challenge you, but with effort and hard work, they will deliver to you. And then eventually, what happens, of course, is that your comfort zone gets bigger and bigger. And this final one, which at the moment might have you in sheer panic mode, actually becomes something that is a learning bit. It's a bit like we were talking today about asking questions at the end. I thought this is actually, there are a few people in here who could probably practice that. You know, asking questions of a manager, not a problem. Asking questions sometimes of the departmental team, oh, I don't want to feel a bit stupid. Asking questions in a conference, oh, now where's that? A stretch or a break? All right. Networking. All right, we're going to get people talking to you about their experience of working and with great hints and tips. But these kind of occasions for some of us can be a real stretch, can't they? You tend to talk to the people you know, all right? And sometimes you might see somebody on their own. So that might be a bit of a learning and a stretch. I'll go and talk to them. They're on their own. I don't know them. But actually walking up to a group of people and kind of inserting yourself in that, that's where networking can sometimes feel very unsafe and where you need to practice your positive bit. We're all in the same boat. So one final piece, folks. I am going to give you the opportunity now to think of something, think of a challenge that you've had. Think of one you've got now, maybe think of one in the past that you find difficult, where you kind of, oh, a bit too much of a fixed mindset there. Maybe even if you're new into your role, perhaps at university or college or something, again, think back to that. Going forward, though, what are you going to do about that? How are you going to stretch yourself? What are you doing that's currently in your comfort zone that you know you could be even better at? You could maximize your potential. One thing that you're going to put in the stretch zone that you're going to start working on tomorrow. Okay? To do that, I'm going to invite you to get on your feet and find another partner. Come on, find somebody different. Stand up around, find somebody different. You have 5 minutes to co-coach each other. want to sit back down, folks. Sit back down. So just in summary, folks, guess what I've been saying is that give yourself permission throughout the whole of your career, when you're maximizing your potential, to always think about and visualize what does success look like. Doesn't matter if it's a task or a project or your career. Think about that. Know the direction of your travel. Honor and care for your values. Play to your strengths. Stretch yourself. And all in service of having a growth mindset, your very best bet. So I'm about to hand over to some people who will absolutely illustrate that that's what they've done. In closing, I really would like to say thank you very much for listening to me this evening, and for participating and talking to each other, etc., etc. I am hoping, because you see, my number one value is making a difference. So I just hope that if I've spoken to one person out there tonight and just inspired you to maximize your potential in your growth mindset way and going forward, it's been a really good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I feel I've got the skills now to really maximise my potential. So without further ado, let's move on to the main part of our evening, our industry VIP career journeys. So please, can I get a warm welcome for Felicity Punnett?
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Am I on? Can you hear me? Yeah, I think you can. Hello, good evening. Thank you very much for having me. And thank you very much to you, Mary. I think I've definitely found my stretch zone, standing up here talking to you all. Maybe verging on the panic zone, I think. So I'm here tonight to talk to you about my journey so far in the food and grocery industry. I graduated from university 2 years ago, so like a lot of you, I'm at the very start of my career. I thought I could share with you some of the learnings that I took from the Fast Track course, and how these have allowed me to develop skills and behaviours that I've taken into my career now, and how they've aided me, really, I guess is what I'm going to talk about. So the 3 areas I want to talk about are networking, resilience, and shouting about your success. But first, let me tell you a quick summary of my journey. So I'm currently a national account manager at Premier Foods. It's one of the largest food companies in Britain, but you may not have heard of us, but what you probably have heard of are some of the household brands behind me: Mr. Kipling, Cadbury Cake, Sharwood's curry sauces. We basically have everything to make a good old Sunday roast. So we've got Paxo stuffing and Bistro gravy. So I studied at Harper Adams University. I studied agricultural food marketing and business. And from there, I applied to Premier Foods for the commercial graduate scheme. I commenced 3 placements: field sales, brand marketing for bachelors, and commercial planning. And from there, I've been offered a job on One Stop in the Tesco team. So One Stop are a chain of convenience stores up and down the country. I've been on the role 6 months, and I guess that's sort of been the perfect place for me to practice and grow my skills. So first off, networking. I'd say I'm confident when I introduce myself to new people, and I would say I'm confident sharing small talk over a cup of coffee. But what I really struggled with when I first started was introducing myself to new people and people I really, really wanted to impress. I sort of thought I wouldn't be taken seriously. I thought I wouldn't have anything interesting to say. So I had to change the way I approached the conversation. Nod to you, Mary. And I put goal setting into practice. So what I didn't know is what I'd get out of the event, but what I did know is that I had a goal. So I had to connect to 3 new people, and I had to ask 2 questions. Why did you come to this event? And what do you want to get out of the day? Now, it's really, really simple. Those 2 questions are really easy to remember, but please don't underestimate how much they've helped me. So I asked these questions because I wanted to be perceived as someone that wanted to be there and didn't want to just turn up for the free glass of wine. People love talking about themselves, so make sure with your questions that you want to ask, if you want to use this technique, make sure they're open-ended, so they always have something to say. And finally, in an external networking opportunity, always follow up, because there's no point in doing all this if you're not going to do that. So I'm not talking about connecting with them on Facebook and a long heartfelt message, because that'd be kind of weird, but why don't you send them a connection on LinkedIn? So there's much value with connecting people with other companies, but don't discount the importance of networking with people around you and in your team. So it's exactly the same concept, but ask more relevant questions about their projects that they're working on. So you'll learn more about them, you'll learn more about the wider business in general, and you'll learn more about everyone's role. So I learned that the questions I asked were usually asked straight back to me. So instead of saying, yeah, it's going fine, thanks, I'm working on a few different things, what I sort of decided to do, and I was just more specific, and I sort of said a success or a challenge that I'd had that day or week. It gave them sort of the opinion that I had more value to the business, I guess, and it sort of made the conversation more memorable. So it's not to say that every conversation I ever had was really prepped for and worked out, and I would actually say the most useful conversations I've had would be in a networking environment that I wasn't expecting, so like the office kitchen. So don't talk about anything too in depth when someone's heating up their lunch, as I probably won't like you that much. But what you can do is it allows you the opportunity to speak to people that you wouldn't obviously or usually meet any of the day-to-day. So it gave me the opportunity when I was in field sales to talk to an account director, and I told him that I wanted to work in sales, and he then invited me off the back of that conversation to a customer-facing day. Now that was the first customer experience I'd had at Premier, so that was very, very useful, and so don't underestimate it. It's important to remember that networking is a mutually beneficial process as well. So you never know when your skills and resources are going to be beneficial to others in your network. The second area, resilience. I know we're going to come on this again this evening. So we all know what resilience is. Resilience is about bouncing back after a fall. So we can't control what happens to us, but what we can control is how we respond to a situation, and what we can control is how we think and feel. So that's especially important to us today in the F&G industry, because we're going to be in a high-pressured, fast-paced, and continuously changing environment. So the good news is, just like networking, resilience can be developed and enhanced, and we can respond better to change, and we can learn how to respond better to change. So to do this, it's important to develop awareness of what we are thinking. So we have to start thinking about what we're thinking. So when I first started, I was very self-critical. I sort of thought if something went wrong, someone would put it down to laziness or the fact that I wasn't cut out for the role. It wasn't true at all. What actually happened was they put it down to my lack of experience. And that's the truth. So it's not to say that you can coast when you're new, so don't do that and say, oh, well, I heard that IGD. What you can do is people understand that you're not experts, and you know they have no expectation of you when you join a team, so make it your own. I also realised that I was getting really stressed about situations that had already happened. I'd anticipate the worst, outcome, and I'd put a lot of pressure on myself. So I was particularly nervous when I started my role in commercial planning, and it turned out to be my favourite because I was so nervous, because it was the most challenging. I actually learned and got the most out of it. So I guess what I was doing is I had this exaggerated sense of responsibility. So I actually learned that I wasn't tackling the role on my own, and I had a whole host of people around me and a whole team around me that was helping me tackle the job as well. Fiddling here with my notes. So once I understood I was sort of being too self-critical, and once I understood that I was putting way too much pressure on myself before a situation had happened, I sort of learned to squish those behaviours. I still do them, but I know I'm doing them, so I learned to try and control them. And what I've tried to do is adopt behaviours that make me more resilient. So I've learned that change is a good thing. I had 6 different managers on the scheme. I was only supposed to have 3, so I really hope that doesn't say anything about me. But I was so annoyed because every time I'd sort of established a relationship with someone, I would sort of then have to do it all over again, like the next week. And I was so frustrated. But what I learned is that I learned to work out the ways of working with other people quite quickly. And instead of getting annoyed, I had to look at it in a different way, and I appreciated that I was understanding the ways that they were working as well. It also meant that when these people moved on, I was knowing people around the business on a personal level as well. Sorry. So something is bound to knock you off your feet. And when it does, just take the time to relax and reflect. So it won't be as bad as you first thought. And when I was on the grad scheme, I'd signed up to those 3 placements, and that's what I thought I was doing. And one day, I unexpectedly got told that I was going to work in the supply chain. And I freaked out. I did exactly what I'm advising you not to do, because what it meant is I had to relocate 3 hours away. I had to work evenings and weekends. And fundamentally, I didn't actually know what I was going to be doing there. So, no surprise, there's a but in this. I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. I learned some invaluable skills that I use now day to day. I met a great team that had so much patience teaching me, and I learned some valuable skills. So I also learned I just had to get on with it, as that was the business critical need, and that's where they needed me at the time. It didn't end up being the setback that I thought it would be. So my last piece of advice, I guess, is shouting about your success. So don't worry, you haven't missed an IGD module if you finished it. This is just a piece of advice in the spirit of sharing that I'd like to give to you. It's really, really easy to do and can have a really big impact. So a recent accomplishment of mine was to get 10 lines of our new products listed in One Stop. So I was really chuffed with this, and I kind of expected other colleagues to just know that it had happened. And my boss said, well, no, actually, obviously I only know it because you've spoken to me about it in our one-to-ones. And from his advice, what I did was I went into store, I took pictures, and then I shared it with the wider team. So I involved marketing, I involved category, I involved everyone that helped get that product onto shelf. And what I also did is I involved senior executives. And off the back of that, I got recognition from the sales director and actually nominated for an award in that area. So I was sort of way more chuffed than I first was, as I sort of told people about it. It might sound like it's being cocky, but it's not. It really is just telling people what's going on and what you're doing on day to day. So people are investing in you when they choose you for a role. So they're investing in what you've achieved and what you have to offer. So how are they going to know that if you don't tell them? And I guess the best bit is people do want to share in your victory, so they're sort of cheering you on as well. And that's all from me, so thank you very much. Panic over.
Thank you. Yeah, we coordinated that. Thanks, Felicity. So thank you, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for having me here tonight. My name's Michael Evans, and I'm Head of Corporate Comms at Greencore. Now, I'm sure a lot of you here have never heard of Greencore. Anyone here heard of Greencore? Do you work for Greencore? No? Okay, so for those of you that haven't heard of Greencore, at least half of you will have, in fact, for all of you, whether you've heard of us or not, at least half of you would have probably consumed one of our products this week. And over the space of a month, that number will increase to 90%. So we're a leading manufacturer of convenience foods in the UK. We produce about 700 million sandwiches and other food-to-go items each year. And these go into all of the main retailers in the UK, including Marks and Spencer's, Co-op, Morrison's, Asda, and Sainsbury's as well. In fact, the only retailer that doesn't take our sandwiches is Tesco. And that's because we need to kind of let another supplier have a go as well. I think it's kind of only fair. But in Tesco, we have ready meals. We also do cooking sauces, pickles, quiche for a whole host of retailers as well. So our products are pretty hard to avoid. To produce all of these products, we've got 16 manufacturing sites in the UK. We employ about 12,000 people, and then we have a number of sort of corporate offices. And our head office is actually in Dublin, where we've got about 25 people working, including our chief exec. Just a little bit about me and what I do at Greencore. So my job, it's all about managing and protecting Greencore's reputation, primarily externally, and this is across all stakeholder groups. So this could be from a media perspective, from an investor perspective, including industry bodies, including IGD, and also amongst potential employees as well. So I do a lot of work on our employer brand and supporting our talent acquisition team around that as well. So this is my CV on a page. So basically I've worked for 2 companies. I've worked for Arla Foods for 9 years, and I've worked for Greencore for 13 years. It probably comes across as being remarkably unambitious, only working for 2 companies, but actually I've had a lot of change, a lot of transition, a lot of different experiences in my job. And even my current job at Greencore, is so different to what I was doing a year ago in the same organisation with the same title. And I guess that's a testimony to the industry that we work in, and actually I guess I've been lucky with the companies that I've worked for as well, that there's been opportunity to grow. So during my time in these companies, I've worked in a number of different markets as well. So my first job out of uni was in Saudi Arabia. I was there for 4 years. I then went back to the head office in Denmark, working for Arla. And then joined Greencore in 2006, first of all in a marketing role, and then 2 years later in corporate comms. In that time I've worked on strategy development, I've worked on business acquisitions, sales of big businesses as well, integration, PR, digital comms, as well as internal comms. Just turn the page over. Oh yeah. So this is about my lack of having a master plan. And I think we've covered this earlier on as well. I actually didn't have a master plan when I started my career. In fact, I didn't go to university until I was in my mid-20s. And I certainly didn't expect to spend the first 4 years of my career in Saudi Arabia working on one of the biggest dairy brands in the region. But that's what I did. I kept an open mind and I took advantage of the opportunities that presented themselves. If we sort of rewind, I moved to Denmark when I was 20, and for sort of personal reasons. And then I spent a number of years learning the language. I went to college and then decided to go to university, where I took my master's degree. I then, as I say, got this job 6,000 kilometers away in a country that I'd never visited at the time. And these were actually pre-internet times as well. So it was hard to find out a lot about Saudi Arabia. But I got a one-way ticket, I got on a plane, and I had 4 fantastic years out there. Fortunately, my family joined me shortly afterwards as well, so it wasn't too bad. But I didn't speak the language. Culturally, it was very different to anything I'd ever done before. But I was curious, and I had an open mind, and I took advantage of these opportunities and embraced the experiences that I was given. But there were a lot of challenges, a lot of cultural challenges living in different countries. You know, in Saudi Arabia, for example, people are really polite. They don't want to tell you if they haven't got an answer. So they'll pretend that they can help you even when they can't. And that can be frustrating sometimes, but okay, you roll with it. I worked in marketing. Our core consumer group were the women in the households. We couldn't speak to them. We couldn't do any marketing towards them. We couldn't do any market research. But you learn to adapt. You learn to work your way through some of these challenges. But it was certainly an interesting start to the beginning of my career. And I guess one of the ways of doing this is about understanding how other people learn from other people, how they've succeeded, how they've come across with our approach. But also sometimes you can learn from people's failures as well. So step back and form your own opinion and use your judgment on things yourself. So after 4 years in Riyadh, I went back to Denmark, and I spent a year at the Arla head office. And in some respects, actually going back to Denmark, coming back to Europe, was a big cultural shock to me, as it was going out to Saudi. The reason being, I was working in an all-male environment. It was quite a macho environment, actually, in Saudi. And then to come back to a more gentler, values-led culture was a bit of a change, a bit of a transition, but it was great. And I, in that job, I was working on I was supporting the UK team on Danish products going into the UK. And it was here that I learned about how challenging and how demanding and how fast-paced the UK food and grocery market was. And I decided, actually, I wanted to get a taste of that myself. So within a year, my family and we moved over to Leeds. So that was kind of my journey from Croydon to the north of England. But that's how I did it via Riyadh and via Denmark. When I joined Greencore, after 4 or 5 years in Leeds, I joined in a marketing role. Greencore decided they wanted to get into brands, and they approached me about a job. I managed to talk myself out of a job within about a year, actually. We decided, actually largely through a lot of the work I've been doing, that brands wasn't the place for Greencore to be, that they should focus exclusively on own label. So there I was, a brand manager, plenty of experience, but no brands to manage, which was a bit unfortunate, but I did it to myself. So So a couple of years later, I was actually offered a job to head up the corporate comms function at Greencore, which was exciting, but also scary. I'd never done corporate comms, didn't really know what it was about, but the company had faith in me. They gave me the support I needed, and I pushed on from there. So that was in 2008. So I've been doing this job now for 11 years, which is incredible. And it does sound incredibly tedious, but actually it's been the most exciting journey of my life. So I know a lot of you here will have very clear, focused career plans. You'll have milestones, you'll have targets to fulfill. And in some regards, I've often reflected on whether I've just shown a lack of ambition, the fact that I haven't planned my career in such a structured way. But one thing's for sure, that if I'd have done that, I would have missed out on so many opportunities that came along in those 22 years, and hopefully many more ahead. Hopefully I'm not at the end of my career quite yet. Let's see how it goes tonight, I guess. But actually by keeping an open-minded approach, and I guess this is this growth mentality, keeping an open-minded approach, opportunities come along that you would have never thought about, you'd have never considered. As I say, no 2 days are the same. From a media point of view, I can get a phone call in 5 minutes' time, and all of a sudden, there's an issue. There's something we have to deal with. I don't know how many of you remember the horse meat crisis, for example, that affected the whole industry. Brexit's another big topic that's taken a lot of attention. And what happens then, from a media point of view, a phone call can just change the world, and you have to respond. You have to react really quickly, and you can't do that on your own. You need to work collaboratively. You need to be able to get the support of others. You need to know how to get the support. And then you need to keep a really calm head. You need to work through these things. You need to be methodical in your approach, both in terms of gathering information and then sharing it back out again. Sometimes the answers aren't always clear, but it's about being calm and measured in your approach. I've also found it's really helped to have very good relationships with people, both within the organisation and outside of the organisation. And I don't just mean your peers, I mean at all levels in the organisation as well, whether it's from the chairman right through to colleagues on the shop floor or in your dispatch. You never quite know when you're going to need some help from people. And it's good to keep an open mind to people and actually reflect on their journeys as well. So, if you haven't already realised it, the food and grocery industry is extremely fast-paced and it's challenging. But it's also exciting, it's invigorating, and it's rewarding. We asked a number of people across the business at Greencore, what's it like to work for Greencore? What does it take? And this was the word cloud that came back. So this is at all levels of our organisation throughout the UK. And there's 3 words that sort of particularly stand out. They're, I say broadly to scale, but certainly fun, resilient, and pragmatic. They were the main words that were played back to us. So I just wanted to reflect a little bit on those words as well. So at Greencore, as I say, tomorrow morning we do 700 million sandwiches a year. So tomorrow morning we're going to have 2 million sandwiches on the shelves of thousands of stores up and down the UK. That said, the orders actually haven't been finalised yet. We won't know our final orders until about 10 o'clock tonight. So obviously we can plan and we can project, but things happen. Demand might change, delivery of supplies might change. Demand will change because of a weather forecast. If it goes over 17 degrees, then sales of sandwiches sort of increase exponentially. Now I'm not predicting a heat wave tomorrow, but that's the sort of thing that can change our patterns and the way we have to work. There could also be, I don't know, there could be trouble with the roads, which means our distribution gets completely messed up. So we have to be resilient, and we need to be pragmatic in our approach to how we solve these things. Because one thing's for sure, our customers won't accept not receiving products, not having the products on the shelves tomorrow morning. In our food-to-go operation, service levels are around 99.7%, maybe 99.8%. Which is pretty remarkable, actually, given the nature of short shelf life products, and that's a credit to the resilience and pragmatism of our teams. We don't readily accept failure. Our people are driven to deliver for our customers, and our customers then reward us by giving us long-term contracts. They reward us through supplier awards, and that helps motivate and drive our teams further on. People are expected to work at pace. They're expected to work collaboratively. And I think we're good at that at Green Core. We're good at dealing with unexpected issues, and that's something, again, that we get rewarded for. The final word, which I haven't touched on yet, and we spent a lot of time discussing this at work, actually, fun. It's really odd. It comes across as, we were talking about our job ads and our employer brand, and how do we talk about fun without people thinking that we're running around and putting red noses on each other's faces, and we've got slides going through the office and ball pits and what have you. But fun's actually, it's really important to our culture. It's about having fun in your interactions with each other. It's about having a laugh. You find the right time, obviously, in the middle of a crisis. Perhaps isn't the best time. But it's about good humour and it's about good spirit. And frankly, who wouldn't want to work with people that know how to have fun, whether that's your customers or whether that's your suppliers? So that's part of our DNA at Green Core as well. And that's something that we test for as well when we take people on. So those were the key words, the key points that I wanted to focus on today. I will be around, obviously, for the Q&A, so please feel free to offer up any questions later on. With that, I'll hand over to Sam. Thank you.
Hi. How you doing? You ready for a glass of wine? Okay, I'll keep it brief. Okay, so hi, my name is Sam Redman, and as Robin said earlier on, for the last 11 and a half years, I've been leading the agenda on leadership, talent and culture for Pret, and I'm here, as he quite rightly said, to do my thing. So over the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'm just going to share with you the overview of my career to date. I am then going to offer you some tools, and what they should do is really bring back the messages that you've been given throughout the evening. But my piece of work and what I'm working on now is how to help people really set effective goals and how to put the right steps in place in order to achieve them. And then I'm going to close with my top tips. So, my career. So those of you that are good with figures very shortly will work out how ancient I actually am. Because in 1989, I was 16 years old. Okay, so I can see, okay, I'm ancient, but that's okay, I'm cool with it. So when I was 16, just to give you a little bit of background, when I was 10, my parents separated and I'd lost touch with my dad. When I was 14, my mum remarried and I gained a stepfather, and that relationship was fractious, to say the least. When I was 16 years old, and I'm sure most of you can put your own mindset back to when you were 16 years old, I was in the middle of studying for my GCSEs. In the February of the year I was due to sit my GCSEs, we received a phone call quite late one night to say that my dad had passed away. Now, he was 43, and when I was 16, that sounded ancient too, but really, the age I am now, it really wasn't that old at all. Now, naturally, even though at the time I didn't think so, it did have a huge impact on my results in my GCSEs. And I think in fair reflection, I flunked them. Now, my parents were adamant that that was it. I needed to come out of education and that I needed to go out and get a full-time job. Now, I knew deep down that those GCSE results were a reflection of a moment in time rather than my true potential and capability. And so the day that they thought I was out applying for jobs, I went to college and enrolled on a BTEC National in Business and Finance. Now, when I got home, they were furious, to say the least. And a couple of days later, they asked me to leave home. Now, it could have been quite easy to back down, but being hedonistic, 16, and thinking I knew what was best, I took them up on the challenge and I did leave home. I studied at college 4 days a week and I worked in a garden centre 3 days a week. I rented a small room, a very small room in a very small house. And I got myself through college. Now, it was quite interesting because whilst I worked really hard, I was determined not to go back without some qualifications to show my parents. It was very difficult because my 16-year-old peer group were all going bowling and going to the cinema. And for the money that I had in my pocket, I was more interested in whether I could have fish fingers or baked beans on Friday night. And so it was interesting the way that I envied what my peer group had, that safety to security, not having those worries about having to have a budget, etc., and getting through your qualifications. And they were quite envious of me having my own independence. And the one lesson I learnt from all of this is the importance of respecting money. So not blowing it, not overspending, making sure that you value what you have. And the older I got, when I turned 18, I picked up some evening work in a bar, and I picked up some other work as well. And I managed to accrue some savings. And when I was 19, I managed to save up enough money to go and travel to Australia for 6 months. And if I can ask you to consider anything in your careers as you go, really go out there and look at the cultures around the world. Because I tell you what, they're far more beautiful than any of the perfect selfies you see on Insta and on Facebook. Actually getting out there with not a lot of money and getting to know people and how they live and what they respect really did, for me, make me value what I got. Anyway, the good news is, after a couple of years from there, I graduated with a degree from university and I got my first management job in a company called Andy's Records. Now, Andy's Records doesn't exist anymore, but at the time it was really cool. I completed my management training and I took on my first record shop up in a place called Barrow-in-Furness, which is just outside the Lake District. Now, this shop had no competition. There was no HMV nearby, no Our Price, no Virgin Music store. But for some reason, out of a league table of 33 shops, this one was just sitting there at number 30. And I was thinking, God, I've worked in busier high streets than this, and this shop should be just doing so much better. So I did the natural stuff at looking at overstocks and all that kind of stuff and any cash miscrepancies. But what I chose to do was really to get to know the team, because they knew the area, they knew their customers, and I wanted to know more about what motivated them. So I got to know them individually and as a group. And what came to me is a lot of them still lived at home. A lot of them had hobbies and interests outside of work that they hadn't been able to explore because of the shift patterns in place. And a lot of them played in local bands. There was a big local music scene in Barrow, who knew? And so what I did is I started to flex the shift patterns around so they could still have their core hours, but that we were sympathetic to what they wanted to do outside of work, that they were a whole person. That was equally communicated amongst the team, so they started bargaining with each other who was doing what shift so they could get out and socialise and play football and whatever else. And I also started to sponsor the local band scene. And word got out, so we increased customers. I changed the range, so we stocked a lot more middle-of-the-road music, which doesn't sit quite well, but it got more customers in. And I also got the word out that we were supportive of the local community. And weirdly, my team became more productive, so I could actually reduce the amount of hours that I needed in the rota on certain days. I'm very pleased to say, after 18 months, I left the shop at number 3 in the table, and I was ready for a new challenge. So my assistant manager was ready to step up, and I moved on to JD Wetherspoons. So I went, I know, one to the other. So I went for an interview in Sale in Manchester at an open recruitment day. And at interview, I was asked, if you're successful today, where would you like to be located in the UK? And I just thought, oh, something I've not thought about, talking about happy accidents. And the next thing that came out of my mouth without the valve kicking in was London. So 3 weeks later, I packed my backpack and I moved. I lived in Stratford, and the pub that I actually did my training and I worked in for a year is just on High Holborn. It's called the Pendrell's Oak, just past Chancery Lane. And I loved it. I worked really hard. Surprisingly enough, I loved the customers. I enjoyed working in the kitchen, flipping burgers on a Friday. I love the stock management side, I love the seller management, and I learned so many skills in such a short space of time that I'm incredibly grateful for to Wetherspoons. But when I graduated from that management training programme, I again thought, well, where do I want to be next year? Do I still want to be working 52-hour weeks at weird ends of the day and letting barrels into the cellar, or do I want something more? And what I actually wanted to do is to find out more about who'd put my training together, who decided what the layout of my fridges were going to be, who designed the menu and located the food that we were having. And so I kept my eye on vacancies at the head office, and I went and joined the customer services team. Now, this is an important note that I wanted to share with you, is when I took the job on customer services, I actually took a small pay cut. Because for me, it was a short-term loss for a long-term gain. I wanted to get my foot in the door. I wanted to understand more. I wanted to do the networking piece that Felicity was talking about. so that I could really sort of get a feel about where did I want to go in that head office function. And then I moved on, so I became training administrator, a regional training manager, and my last role at Wetherspoons was to lead the training team. So I had 150 field-based managers, 50 training centres, 40 to 50 events a day to run. It was the day before digital, so everything was physical classroom, and I loved it. And then one Monday morning, I was called into the HR director's office, and I was told that my role was going to be made redundant. Now, it doesn't matter how strong you are, how big your growth mindset is, you have an ego. And when somebody says you're performing at your best, you're enjoying what you're doing, you're investing in the business, they say that role doesn't exist anymore, it's pretty difficult to hear. And so it took me a couple of weeks to put myself back together. And what I decided to do was think about what are the elements of the role that I had that I really loved, that I wanted to take into my next role. And what were the brands that I was really attracted to? And 10 weeks later, I started my job at Pret. And I've been at Pret for 11 and a half years. As I said, I lead the agenda on leadership, talent and culture. And I suppose the best way to summarise that is when companies spend a lot of time and money thinking about what a great customer offer looks like, so how do we get customers through the door? How do we get them to feel safe in purchasing products? How do we get them to feel positive about when they're sharing their stories of their experience with their friends and family? And how do we let them feel that they are noticed when they leave the shop? I wanted that exact same experience for my internal customers at Pret. How did we get an offer together that gave people the motivation to want to push that door open in the office every morning? That they found the work and the things on offer challenging, motivational and stretching, innovative. How did we get them to the stage where they would share positively their stories of their employment at Pret with their friends and family to create further customers? And how did we put things in place that they were noticed when they left at the end of the day and they'd done a great job? And so my ask to you is just think about you and your culture and your business. And I often say to my clients, don't worry about fitting in because you've already earned your place. Think about how you fit together with that culture. How do you represent it? And how do you bring it to that next level as your companies grow? And so now. So 18 months ago, I had a great one-to-one with my boss, and we had the conversation about what next. And I was given two clear choices. I could move further up the career ladder at Pret, or I could specialise. And I chose to specialise in an area that I love, and that is people and coaching. I went back to college, I gained a diploma, and I now have my own business. I left Pret at the end of July. You are my first public speaking performance. And I now have my own business. So this is my model. As you can see, I've not had my artist all over it yet. This is me. But what I do with individual clients and businesses is I help them navigate their goals, explore where they are now and where they want to go, really reinforce the strengths that they have, because when you are going through change, it's not about checking out things. It is about what is that core thing that you're going to keep strong to pivot and change for the future. And then we work on the wholeness or the resilient piece that Mary was talking about earlier, and then back up to the top to navigate the way forward. And so the goal setting piece, you've heard a lot about goals tonight, but what I wanted to offer to you while I'm here is how I work with my clients to help them set goals. We tend to get our head down and want to get things done really quickly, and it is important to have an eye on the prize at the end. But it is also important to enjoy the journey and the opportunities that come up. And it's not all about your career, because you are more than your career. You have 3 core pillars to explore. There is your career up there, but there's also your health, your mental and physical health, and your relationships. Who are those people that you have around you that will enable you to grow into the person that you want to be? And you sit in the middle. So what I've put in the slides tonight, and obviously we've not got time to do the exercise right now, is something for you to take away. But the questions are, where do you want to be in 2 years' time? And I want you to consider these 3 areas, not just your career. Where do you want to be in your health? Where do you want to be with those relationships? And what will that enable you to do in your career? And then come back to now. Where are you today in those 3 areas? What's working? What is something you might want to look at? Then what does halfway look like? So if you know where you want to be in 2 years, you know where you are in those 3 core pillars, then what's halfway? What do you need to let go of to make space for the journey ahead? So what are those habits that you might have had for a long time that have served you good purpose up until now, but you can now let go of to make space for new habits that are going to allow you to grow into the future you? And what is the first step that you can take tomorrow? And who are you going to tell? Because the best way to achieve your goals is to have a positive sponsor on the journey with you. That's not going to judge you, that's not going to tell you you're right or wrong, but he's just going to be there to hear you out and remind you of what you're trying to achieve. And the most important, I'm all about the treats, is how you're going to celebrate. When you plan goals and you plan milestones and you plan steps, you should also plan how you're going to reward yourself for that. Now, for me, it's shoes and handbags. I'm not saying you should throw all your wages away on that. But what is it you're going to do? Are you going to go and get a massage? Are you going to go for a walk? Are you going to go on a holiday? Are you just going to have a night off on your own? Are you going to go to the movies? Whatever it is, put those celebration points in. Because when you self-resource your celebration points, they're a lot sweeter than waiting for somebody to recognise you. Now, a lot of my clients, when they come to me in their goal-setting piece, will say, I want to improve my confidence in... And so going back to the work that Mary shared with you earlier, the only way to improve your confidence in any way is to build your knowledge and experience. And the only way to get knowledge and experience is to move into that growth mindset and step out of your comfort zone. And also, this is one of my colleagues that I worked with over the summer from the Centre for Inclusive Leadership. Remember that if you are not fully resourced, you will see the world through a different set of shades. So therefore, remember that we see things how we are in that moment rather than how they actually are. So pay attention to what those filters are telling you and what do you need to resource. So finally, my top tips. Failure is the only option. Take some risks. We are bound by our successes. We heard this tonight. If we do something really, really well, we'll just keep doing it. But you know then what your result's going to be. So therefore, take that stretch. Set goals that you want, not what you think others want. Don't suffer from comparisonitis. This is your journey, okay? Make sure it's for you, it's authentic, it's congruent, and you really, really want it. Stop wasting your time, audit and make space for growth. There's a great quote by a guy called Jack Welch, and he says, if the rate of change on the outside is faster than the rate of change on the inside, failure will occur. Therefore, keep learning, keep growing, pick up some new skills, read some different books, change the habits, and you'll learn something new. Look after yourself, you are unique. Health is a big thing for me. I know it doesn't look like it, but mental and physical health and feeling great about yourself is really important. Machine learning, robots, computers, all the threats that there'll be half the jobs missing that are in play today may be true. But machines can't replace what is beautiful about us as humans, and that is having a head, a heart, and a gut. So look after it. And finally, explore, change what you want to change, and move towards fulfillment. Thank you very much. Keep in touch. All right.
So we now move on to the penultimate part of this evening. Oh, everyone off? Anyway, for the rest of you, so if you have a question, please put your hands up and a couple of our team will come out with microphones for you then to ask your question. So please can I welcome back on the stage our VIP panel and our chair, Hayley Elise.
Come on. Right, yes, so I believe we've probably got about 15 minutes, I think. And what we'll do is we will take questions from the floor. And I've also got my colleague, Isabel, just over there on the right-hand side, who's got the questions coming in from the streamers as well. So we want to make sure that they are included. But before we open up the questions to the floor,
I'd just like to build on something that Mary touched on earlier on, and we've had lots of great advice this evening. So, around building your growth mindset, maximising your potential. Sam, you mentioned about, taking those risks. And Mary, you mentioned also about stepping outside of your comfort zone. So we know that when we're most challenged, we learn the most in those moments in time. So if you wouldn't mind answering this question for us, and I'd like to ask each of you to answer this if that's okay. Can you tell us of a specific challenge that you've had to overcome, how you managed to do it, and what you learned? Sam, I'll start with you. We haven't got any takers on that one. So.
God, what's not been a challenge? So I suppose so it's going to be a personal one, I'm afraid, because I think I've just done my career today. So I suppose I like to think about when I'm really like this and I can't see something clearly and I'm finding something too challenging, I kind of stop and think about if I make a decision now, what is it going to look like in 5 or 10 years, which is easier to do when you've got kids. So I've got a daughter, she's now 13. And when myself and her dad split up, I really wanted to wring his neck, quite frankly. But I chose, from my own experience with my parents that I shared with you earlier, that I then knew what 5 and 10 years looked like because I'd lived it. And so what I chose to do was the opposite. So I chose to be kind. I chose to be kind to him, and ultimately she is now benefited from that, because actually, although we're both he's remarried, I'm in a relationship 9 years in. What is always important to me is that when there's a big formulative event, him and his wife and me and my partner can sit at the same table and enjoy the same experience. And for me, that's what's made it worth it. So I'm not saying it was easy, but instead of getting overwhelmed by the challenge when I can feel it's just too much to make a decision right now, and actually what I want to do is something quite horrible that I don't think about right now, I think about the future and do the best thing I can do right now to influence that time ahead.
So some emotional intelligence. Yeah. Michael?
I guess the biggest challenge was thinking of an answer to that question in about 30 seconds. And I think my approach on that was to sort of panic ever so slightly, listen to Sam's response, and then try and work my way through another response. So I think I sort of said in my presentation, I work in a really fast-paced environment. Things come out of the blue that you have to deal with just in no time. So I think it's really weird, but I won't be specific. I'll talk general, because it happens on a sort of regular basis that things will come out of the blue and then you've got to react. And actually, do you know what the best thing is? To stop, take a cup of coffee, have a cup of tea.
Break state.
And then, because I go for this Kubler-Ross sort of circle of grief where you sort of panic and get angry and you want to blame someone and you calm down. I kind of cycle through that really, really quickly, about 20 times. So I kind of just need to just take a deep breath, compose myself, sit down. Sometimes I'll just write and I'll just scribble and think about where I want to be at the end of this, and then I can start building the steps to get there.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess mine's just really recently and sort of everyday challenges that I'm finding in my role right now. So when I sort of signed up for it 6 months ago, I was like, I really want to go into sales. Had I had any sales experience per se? No, not really. I only knew I wanted to do it because from roles that I'd had in the past, and sort of, I really liked working towards targets, and I'd sort of seen all these bits of roles I'd liked and sort of put them all together, and that's what I thought and what I still think is sort of what you need to sort of be successful in a sales role. So I guess a challenge of mine is every day I do something wrong, and my boss would usually have to dig me out. But what I make sure is I don't do that same wrong thing again. So next week, I won't sit down with my buyer and mess up again, because I will have prepared the answer, that I know she's inevitably going to ask, and things like that. So I guess for me, it's just sort of, if I keep doing the same thing wrong, then you need to work around it, and I guess that's it for me. Just everyday challenges.
Learning fast.
Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. So, who would like to be the first person to ask a question from the floor? The lady in the black jacket, just there, Natasha, please. Oh, are we on? Try again. Hello? Can everyone hear her at the back? Yeah? Okay.
So I started on the Tesco grad scheme 7 weeks ago as a buyer. So you, as suppliers of like retailers, you probably find this funny, but we all start in the same position, and we now meet with suppliers on our own. And I definitely get massive imposter syndrome when you guys come in or anyone comes in and you're all very experienced and you're looking at us as if we're scary, when actually we're so scared of you. How have you experienced imposter syndrome, and how did you get over that?
Yes, go on.
I got
Felicity,
told, fake it till you make it. And it's so true, it really is, because I sort of had to, I had to go into my buyer meetings very recently. I sort of had to think like, oh my God, I've been in the role 6 months, I'm not going to tell you that, I'm going to pretend I know absolutely everything. I didn't, so it always came up with something that I didn't know. And you just have to, learn from everyone else in your team, because they will know what to do. But when I guess I got asked a question by my buyer that I didn't know, I'd say, well, let me go back to my business, let me check on that. And I didn't have to say, I don't know, there are ways to go work around it, and you pick it up very, very quickly. That's all I'd say. But yeah, fake it till you make it. You sort of do until the end, don't you? Because that's what I got told by my boss on my first placement. And he said, who's this account director of one of our major brands? And he said, yeah, well, I don't know half the time what I'm doing. He said, I ask questions so people think I'm listening. I thought, oh my God, why are you telling me that? And I guess it's very true. That's what I'd say.
Acting skills is the next masterclass, by the way. Michael?
I've got a slightly different approach, probably the opposite approach actually. I think I'm really, and don't take this the wrong way, I think I'm really genuine. I'm really honest about who I am. And I'm not saying you're not, right? See, I also say things about thinking about the consequences. No, but I think it's okay to be honest about things that you don't understand as well. But I do get that there's a weird dynamic between suppliers and there is a bit of a power thing, or you think there is, but actually, if you're working on and this is the thing about being genuine and authentic, if you're working on a common goal, surely it's in everyone's best interest to be really straight about it. Whether it's you want more money for products, or whether we want more money for products, if you can agree on that and then start to build and work from there, that's ideally the best situation. That said, I haven't done a customer presentation for 12 years, so what do I know?
Sam?
Great advice from both. I thought I was going to have to separate you. So I would go at it slightly differently, and I would say that voice in your head, when that kicks in, I had a client once that didn't realise it was their own voice. It was like, well, whose voice is it? I don't know, it's just in there. And it's like, you do know it's you. But you are in control of that if you pay attention to it and give it something more useful to think, and also just dial the volume down a little bit. And it's about practice. But the moment you hear it start to be as loud as it possibly is, then just say, I'm just quieting you down. But honestly, start to retrain it and then start to replace it with more positive language after. So say, okay, so that didn't go, and that went well, and that kind of thing. So start to retrain whatever that voice is offering you in your head.
Okay, does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Thank you very
I
much.
wish I said your answer. I think that you did look a lot better, wouldn't it?
Isabel, have we got anything from the streamers that have come in?
Yeah, I've got a good question here. So someone's asked, when you're thinking about your own personal development and sort of planning for that, do you think it's more important to focus on really building and making the most of your strengths, or to kind of polish up some of the weaknesses? What do you think is most impactful?
Good question. So for anybody who didn't hear that, what's best to focus on, your strengths or your weaknesses?
Shall I say that?
Yeah, go.
So I'd say strengths. That's where you get the biggest marginal gains, surely. If you can improve on what you're good at, then you could be spending a lot of time, a lot of effort working on some weaknesses, and maybe you'll never crack them. Maybe you're putting a lot of effort into something that only gives you a small improvement. Whereas if you're good at, I don't know, whether it's negotiating or selling or presenting, just keep working on that and develop that even further. That would be my view.
Sam?
So Strengths, absolutely. Play to your strengths. It's the reason you are here. If you try and be the jack of all trades, master of none, that's exactly what will happen. And so don't spread yourself too thin. However, if I could, in any interview job scenario, I would eradicate the word weakness, because they're just areas you can choose to develop. So as and when you move into different roles, there may be some areas you need to dial up and just start to tune up a little bit. And then there are other areas that you might want to dial down that it's like the habits, the things that have served you well in the past. So absolutely play to your strengths, but just pay attention of the areas you may need to develop as your career progresses.
Yeah, I agree. I would always say play to your strengths. Why not be known as the great presenter or the brilliant negotiator? If that's your strength, use it and fly with it. It's not to say don't work on your weaknesses or areas to improve, I should say, Sam. An area to improve mine is presenting. So, you know, that's what I tried to do tonight. I'm not going to get there for a while, but, you know, I recognised one of my weaknesses. So I guess as early on as I am, I actually have to first recognise what my strengths and what my weaknesses are. I'm still learning that. I don't know yet. I can see areas that I'm starting to be a bit stronger in. I can see areas that I know I need a bit more help on. But that's the first thing. You know, take it from feedback is what I usually use. You know, I have to say, honestly, tell me, you know, what was good about that and what wasn't good about that. As that's how I sort of have found out what my strengths are starting to look like.
And maybe going back to Green Core, obviously on your big diagram with all the big words, with one of them being fun, I think sometimes maybe when you're playing to your strengths, that's when you have the most fun and you're at your most happiness, which is really, really important, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, should we take another question from the floor? Yes, we'll go first with the gentleman in the grey top.
Hi there. I'd like to pick up on the point about shouting about your success, because I find that's something which is quite hard to do. It doesn't really come naturally to me. It almost seems a little bit cocky at times, and I'm wondering more on kind of like how you should go about doing it. Like all three of you, like the ways in which you want to promote yourself and not make it come across the wrong way.
I don't want to sort of bore you with the same example, but I still am exactly in your shoes. It sort of still sounds a bit cringy, you know, shouting about your success. Like you don't want to sort of stand up and say, oh, I'm great at this and I've done this and that's it. So the way I sort of spoke about this example, so I apologise to you again, but it was sort of this is what happened, and it wasn't just me that made that happen. I was sort of the final step in a long line and a long process. So that's why when I sort of told the business, it was a case of, wow, okay, we've got these products in convenience, so why, you know, and to help everyone else in the business. So that's what we've focused on, and that's what we've done, and we've used marketing and we've used category. And so thanks guys, let's celebrate together. And it was a wider success and not just me. So it may well have been someone in the marketing team. They said, oh great, you've got listed in convenience. That's really, really good. And they may well have been recognised along with that too. So it wasn't just, hey, I've done this. It was a well done guys. We really sort of worked hard together to achieve this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I mean, you said as well, you know, it feels as if you're being cocky about yourself, but the success doesn't have to be about you. It can be about the delivery, the overall project. So you can shout about the result, you know, and then people can draw their own conclusions to who delivered that result. I feel exactly the same as you actually, you know, and equally I'll get frustrated when I see other people get applauded for stuff, and I'm thinking, geez, I do that sort of stuff every single day. How come they're getting the credit? But I'm quite low ego. But I think if you recognise the success of a project as something that's been delivered, rather than, aren't I great, I did this, you know, isn't the result great, isn't this outcome great, I think that's a good way of doing it. And it's a bit of a humble brag as well. You know, you can kind of get the message across without putting yourself front and centre.
I would only add to that a piece around, think about how the person you're speaking to has benefited from the piece of it. So what do they need to know? What's going to impress them? And pick that audience member out. So if I'm aware of somebody's objectives of the piece of work that they're working on, just their job title, you know the area of the business that they're interested in, then I will think about what's in it for them. Because sometimes if it's not in for them, there's the danger of coming across in the way that you've just described, because they're like, why are they telling me that? You know, they just want to... So maybe think about what's in it for them.
Thank you. Yes, question at the back there, the gentleman holding up the piece of paper.
Hi, Anne. What have been the biggest mistakes in your careers, and what have you learnt from them?
Don't be shy.
Do you know what? I'm still going to therapy to try and get it out of my mind, so I really don't want to. No, I don't know. I think I've when I was in marketing, I remember spilling a product all over the buyer. That was a pretty bad mistake. But no, do you know? I think you have to learn from your mistakes, don't you? I mean, I think it's got to be pretty bad for you to not be able to pull it back and turn it around. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't give a really great example.
Felicity?
Well, I can give you a sort of a visual mistake I made on the Bisto line. God, it was on the first week, and I had to press the emergency stop button on the Bisto line, and lids were literally flying past my face. Anyway, so that was a big mistake. But so I immediately thought being able to separate work life and personal life, and not being able to make it sort of have too much of a dramatic effect. So I was sort of very het up and constantly answering emails all hours of the evening, and I always had, you know, emails to my personal phone. I didn't leave them just to my work phone, and I felt like I was getting quite stressed out way before it even came to 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, because I'd think about it all weekend. So one of the ways I went around that was to switch it off. You can't do anything about it. No one else is thinking about it on a weekend, so enjoy yours, because you don't have to have the conversation until 9 a.m. So a mistake that I was making, and especially on the grad scheme, was to get too het up about situations when I couldn't even do anything about them, 7 o'clock in the evening. It's not a bit, that's just sort of more general. I hope that's all right.
I think probably a lot of us are guilty of that,
Yeah.
to be honest. So it's a good piece of advice.
I think it's not necessarily a mistake, but I think if I was to reflect back on my last decade, I wish I'd pivoted earlier into my new career as having my own business. And I don't know what I was waiting for, and I think that's the question I'm trying to find the answer to. Maybe I was having such a great time in the job that I had. Maybe it was the comfort blanket of having a salary every month. Maybe it was the benefits with your private healthcare. And I don't know the answer to it, but there was obviously something that was stopping me from doing it. So I think it's not necessarily a mistake, but it is something that I think, why wasn't I doing this 5 years ago? Because it's great being your own boss.
I guess if I can also just add, now I've listened to you guys and thought about it, not necessarily a mistake that I've made, but what quite a lot of my peers have made, is thinking it was the be-all end-all if you went into a particular role. So I sort of knew I wanted to go into sales, and I sort of saw the quickest way there, and I thought, well, if that doesn't happen, then, oh my God, what have I got to live for? I sort of put so much pressure on that situation, but then now I'm in it, I realised that there were so many other routes that I could have taken that would have been just as good. So I could have had, really great category experience or anything like that would have eventually got me to the right place and potentially even, further up. So I guess, don't put too much pressure on the career journey that you might have and sort of the pathway that you might have in your mind right now.
Okay, next question, please. Yes, the gentleman just in the middle there. Oh, Natasha's making her way through. Here we go.
Hi, I was wondering if any of you had any tips for promoting a positive cultural change amongst your peers, other than leading by example.
Positive cultural change.
Other than leading by example. Yeah. That was my answer.
You started, Michael. Do you want to carry on?
I mean, leading by example, sure, it's the best thing you can do. It kind of goes back to this thing about pointing out the great stuff you do as well. I think it's sometimes you demonstrate the behaviours that you want to see in other people, rather than sort of shouting and telling people about it. I've been involved in launching our sort of values programs at Green Corps, a few years ago, and we was always committed to the fact that this isn't about putting posters on the walls, but it was very much leading by example. That's unavoidable. I think being true to yourself again, being authentic, yeah, that's it. So that was the answer I think you gave there.
I had a million and one questions in my head just to drill into what you've just asked for. I think for me, it's who do you need to get permission off to make that change happen, and go for it. What I'm hearing, and you've only offered me one thing, is you're seeking to gain permission to lead on that change, and there's a block here with permission. So who is that person? Who is the person that could sponsor the change that you know will be of benefit, and be really clear on what those benefits will be, and then take them on the journey? I know I had something similar. And I'm trying to put that hat on about 2 years ago, and it required financial investment, it required a change in mindset, and it required a degree of bravery. And what I actually did was picked off the MD and took him on the journey, because when you've got a senior stakeholder who buys into what you're saying, it's amazing how the change starts to sort of happen through osmosis.
Yeah, sort of to build on that, I guess don't be afraid of the change. So if you've spotted something that perhaps no one else has, someone's hired you to have a fresh look on the team, the working environment that you're in. So don't be afraid to sort of point out, the parts that you could develop and parts that the team could work on, to sort of promote that change. Don't just get sort of lulled into this is how it's always been done, so let's just carry on. So don't forget that, it has to change to develop, and it has to change to sort of be successful.
What are both of your views actually on kind of ways of working regards kind of changing the culture? Do you think they can have a big impact? Where a lot of organisations, for example, are using agile. Do you feel that can have an impact as well on the culture?
Again, I would do it the other way around then. I would want to take the internal customer on the journey. So the first thing I would do is find out what the state of play is, rather than going straight in and going, and this is now happening. It's about who needs to sponsor it, and how are these people, and what do they need, what are their expectations. We are having something similar, or we were, as like before, I keep forgetting I've left, about flexible working patterns. And so instead of trying to instigate what we thought was best, it was about what do people want? What does that look like?
Thank you.
I don't really have anything to add. I mean, when we launched our sort of values program, it was more than values, it was behaviours as well.
Yeah.
And it was linked to performance and delivery for the business. If you can say there's a direct line between our vision and our behaviours and our values, it's incredibly compelling, and it's hard for anyone in the organisation to resist that. And then you link in your programs to support that, so your performance management, your learning and development, your talent acquisition, all of that sort of all links in your employer brand. If you bring it all together for the ultimate goal of delivering your purpose or your vision, then it's hard to ignore.
Okay, thank you. Well, we've just got time for one more question. First hand up. Oh, this gentleman over here in the black top. Yes, just over here, just on the end here.
Hiya, it's a green top, by the way.
Oh, is it? Oh, well, I've just learned something this evening. Was he colourblind? Sorry. The gentleman in the green top.
What we've been talking about is mainly, comes over as mainly an introspective journey and reflection about our strengths and our weaknesses, and something we do on our own. I find that often the ideas we got about our own weaknesses and strengths are not especially what other people perceive. So the input from other people can be more valuable than our own. How would you, as a panel, say you engage other people into that, that journey of saying what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses? How do you encourage them to participate in that? Because that's not easy to approach people.
So if I've got that right, that is encouraging people to kind of get involved in your feedback loop. Yep. Felicity?
So it's very easy to ask your peers and your friends how you did. So I'm going to go away tonight and say, how did I do? Was that all right? But and that's really good because, but they're going to hear, you know, they're going to say what they want to hear, you know, yeah, you were great, like, you know, you have no weaknesses, it was perfect. So make sure you use people that you don't connect, like see on a daily basis, or you're not connected with outside of the role. So because they will be quite honest with you. So it is stepping out your comfort zone a little bit, because you've got to ask for feedback, and you may get something that you don't like to hear, but that's what you need. That is really what you need. So
yeah, that's the most valuable.
I was developing a goal plan, and to do that, I needed to know areas I needed to work on. Now I could easily go on to my friends and said, right, they're in different teams, but you know, like what can I work on? What can I put on this? So what I did is I went to supply chain, who I do work with on very sort of strictly professional level. They don't know me outside of work. They don't know me really day to day, and they gave me some really good sort of feedback and advice that I was able to sort of really highlight some of the areas to focus on.
Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it does kind of go against human nature to give feedback, particularly positive feedback. You know, people feel awkward about it. So I'll use that example about leading by example. You know, I'm quite open and very sort of supportive and praiseworthy of people if they do things well. I can also give feedback about things that could be better, but try and do it in a nice way. A lot of organisations have formal feedback systems where you can get 360 degree. I think part of it is be quite specific in what you're asking people to feedback on. So not sort of necessarily how did it go, but you know, could you hear me? You know, was I doing the right thing with my hands? Did I draw attention to the right? You know, be quite specific in what you're asking people, and then it's kind of harder. Then at least then if they haven't got anything incredibly positive to say, it's not about your overall performance, but about something quite specific, and it feels as if you're trying to make some improvements on things there rather than the overall performance.
And I would only add one thing to that, because that was exactly where I would be specific about what you want feedback on. Don't, because what you'll tend to get is the things that they want to develop about themselves. When they get it, naturally edits what they're going to look for because they're thinking about themselves. But I would ask for it before you take the action. So I'm going to do this in a minute, or I'm taking on this project. What would be really helpful for me at months 1, 2, or afterwards, if you could give me feedback on these 3 things, because I'm trying to develop them. So ask for it before rather than after, because if you ask for it after, they'll only remember, they'll go, oh, because they'll be thinking about the impact of the piece of work or presentation. So I would just tee it up beforehand, but be really specific.
Okay, so our time is up. It's going to be time for a drink in just a second. Robin's going to come and close down the session. But first of all, a nice big round of applause, please, for Sam, Michael and Felicity. Thank you.
So it is almost wine o'clock, you'll be pleased to know. But before you go, what's next? So unfortunately, the Fast Track programme does come to an end at the end of November. So I guess the first thing you should do is complete the course so you can get your certificates. We also have an online discussion board at the end of Module 4. A few have already commented, so that's great. Might have been from the streamers as well. So please share your learning experiences from tonight on there. And it's also an excellent networking tool. Now, as I mentioned before, IGD are the lifelong learning partners for the food and consumer goods industry. So what can we do for you? What's next? We have an on-demand learning hub, which has 11 core topics of interest for the industry. You can see there's a few on the screen there. And that includes all sorts of content. We've got videos, we've got downloads, career profiles, infographics and articles. So do check it out when you've got some time. And we also have our IGD newsletters. Now, if you sign up for the IGD Learning newsletter, you will be amongst the first to hear about our exciting 2020 events program, which contains webinars and masterclasses and our annual conference. Best of all, it's all free. Thanks. So we've come to the best slide, the last one. So before we go, let's give a big round of applause again for our speakers for tonight. I also want to thank Sainsbury's for letting us host here this evening. Yep, why not? And I'd also like to thank you, both here in Holborn and for those streaming, for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here tonight.